I am the Philosophical Bachelor, and today I want to talk about the nothing. Is the nothing actually something? Stephen Mumford, in his book Absence and Nothing, The Philosophy of What There Is Not, published in 2021, gives a fair hearing to nothingness and its correlates, being actualities, but then refutes them to explain why nothingness is in fact nothing. Not nothing at all, just nothing actual. In any such work on the nature of nothingness, it is important to clarify one's terminology to avoid confusion. I will use terms like actual, actuality, exists, and existence when referring to the actuality of things, including the nothing, while words like real and reality will refer to how some things can be real but not actual. Things that are actual are real, such as how Descartes, in his radical doubt, concludes that he exists because there is otherwise no one doing the doubting. Some things are real but not actual, such as Alice in Wonderland or Santa Claus. This then leaves us to ponder, what is the kind of reality that things that are real but not actual possess, if any? This is the crux of Mumford's book. Before we turn to Mumford, let us consider the various takes on the nature of nothingness. There are logically four categories. 1. Nothingness is actual. 2. Nothingness is real but not actual. Its proponents may grant the usefulness of such a concept, even its necessity, but do not consider it actual. 3. An agnosticism or uncertainty towards the nature of nothingness. 4. Nothingness is not just not actual, it is not even real. On the first category, some schools of thought that teach non-dualism and certain religions and mystical traditions consider nothingness to be actual. Daoism is a key example. The Tao Te Ching reifies nothingness or emptiness as mysterious, yet the origin of everything. Let us consider three passages. The Tao as a thing is elusive and indistinct. Though indistinct and elusive, within it there is an image. Elusive and indistinct, within it there is a thing. Deep and dark, within is an essence. Within this essence is fundamental reality. Within it is truth. There is an undefined thing that came before heaven and earth, still and formless, alone and immutable, circulating everywhere yet not diminished. It is the mother of heaven and earth. I do not know its name, but if I am forced to name it, it is the Tao. If forced to name it, I name it the Great. As great, it ever flows. Though the Tao is empty, its uses are inexhaustible. It is so deep that all things come from it, so profound that it dulls sharpness, unravels complications, tempers brightness, unites dust, while remaining tranquil. Who could have birthed it, since it seems to precede even God? Lao Tzu realizes that the Tao is ineffable. Human understanding is not sufficient to fully comprehend it, making words inadequate to express the nature of the Tao. However, he nonetheless, within such limitations, tries to express the profundity of how this emptiness, this nothingness that is the Tao, is the origin and continued source of existence for all of reality. Buddhism also takes nothingness seriously. It understands sunyata as the state of nothingness where there is no distinction between things. As the Heart Sutra tells us, form is emptiness, emptiness is form. This lack of differentiation means that all things are interconnected, which is taught by Buddha as the principle of dependent origination. Kaiji Nishitani of the Kyoto School explains sunyata as the ground, the basis of reality. Yet Buddhism goes so far as to then let go of emptiness, teaching the emptiness of emptiness. They do not reify emptiness. The Samyutta Nikaya says, there is, this is one dead end. There is not, this is also another dead end. Without veering towards either of these dead ends, the Tathagata teaches the Dharma by the middle. Hence, Buddhism's stance is not about an emptiness per se, that from nothing can spring forth anything, but the lack of essential identity of any one thing, since it owes its existence to other things and contexts. This will occupy the second category, where nothingness is a concept that is real but not actual. I may, however, be overgeneralizing. To speak of Buddhism as if it has a singular doctrine will be remiss, since its various sects and schools have differing emphasis and even beliefs that differ. Western philosophy has to some extent been influenced by Eastern traditions, obvious examples being thinkers like Arthur Schopenhauer, who explicitly discusses his Hindu and Buddhist influences, Martin Heidegger, who influenced and was influenced by Eastern traditions, but to even earlier thinkers such as the ancient Greeks, since trade routes have been established even in those times, connecting the West and Asia. Whether Heidegger reifies nothingness or not is debatable, and perhaps he can fall then into my third category. Jean-Paul Sartre tells us about an ancient Greek distinction of totality, where the first is the universe of things familiar to us, while the second includes the first, but also the nothingness surrounding this universe, to then really encompass the totality of everything, the universe of things plus the nothingness outside it, hence falling into my first category of the actuality of the nothing. Before we leave my scanty and hence inevitably oversimplifying overview of the various positions, we should consider the position of science. Early scientific thinking, perhaps what some may consider as pre- or proto-scientific, of thinkers such as Aristotle deny nothingness. Nature abhors a vacuum in their metaphysics, which then leads to paradoxes such as how things can therefore move if there is no emptiness for them to move into. If there is no movement, how can there be change? Epicurus thus conceive of the void to solve this problem, with atoms that can swerve in a void that gives rise to change and indeterminism. Much later in the 16th century, Giordano Bruno posits an infinite universe that is continuous with no void in between, where seemingly empty space is filled by the ether. Isaac Newton also thinks that there must be an ether, since material contact seems required to transmit forces. A vacuum was thought impossible, though Galileo Galilei had theories on how to make one. One was finally made in 1643 by his student Evangelista Torricelli, where the empty space above a column of mercury was recognized for what it was, a vacuum. Today, we have no problem with vacuums, using them in vacuum tubes and vacuum cleaners. More significantly, our current scientific understanding is that emptiness seems to pervade much of the universe, from the vast emptiness of outer space to how most of the volume of an atom is empty. Yet this latter emptiness, described by quantum theory, is not quite a void devoid of anything. It is a space filled with fields, which fluctuations and interactions can give rise momentarily to energy and virtual particles. Even the lowest possible energy state of 0 kelvins is not a state devoid of all energy. There seems to be no genuine void possible on such an account due to Werner Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. We are now ready to turn to Mumford's account, which grounds itself on Parmenides' influential account against nothingness. Around 500 BCE, Parmenides wrote a poem entitled On Nature. Some of its lines are lost, as with all of his other writings, but this work, which predates Socrates and hence Plato and Aristotle, is an important touchstone which later thinkers have to respond to. As the title implies, Parmenides is describing an ontology of what is, which is being, and what is not, which is nothing. Not nothing as a rarefied something, but nothing as really nothing at all, neither actual nor real. He is then one of the rare thinkers that fall into my fourth category. Mumford summarizes Parmenides' way of truth that encapsulates the following propositions about nothingness. 1. Nothing is not. 2. There are no degrees of being. 3. Nothing comes from nothing. 4. Non-being is unknowable. 5. Reality is a single plenum. 6. Non-being is unthinkable and unnameable. 7. Neither motion nor change is possible. Parmenides' argument is systematic. Nothingness has no existence. There are no degrees of being, meaning either things exist or do not, with no possible state in between. Because of the non-existence of nothingness and no degrees of being, we cannot possibly know the nature of nothingness. This means that we cannot speak about it or even think of it. Change is impossible since what is and cannot not exist, while what is not and cannot exist. There is hence no way for things to change and develop, making the movement of becoming inadmissible, which then implies that reality is an actual, monolithic, unchanging whole. A hard Parmenidean will believe that all of Parmenides' 7 propositions are true. Mumford does not go so far. He agrees with Parmenides that the nothing does not exist and that there are no degrees of being. Because nothingness does not exist, no existence can come from it. He, however, believes that it is possible to think and speak about nothingness, since that is what we, and Parmenides himself do. Nothingness can hence subsist as a concept, not quite a full-fledged existence, but an intellectual one, which is why it is termed subsistence, a state where it is real but not actual. Moreover, he does not agree that just because there is no nothingness, that change and movement then becomes impossible. They are possible and indeed are actual because the concept of being requires the conceptual foil of nothingness. He hence regards himself as a soft Parmenidean. There are 2 dimensions to the question of nothingness: ontological and epistemological or methodological. As an epistemological point, Mumford cites with William of Ockham that we should not multiply entities unnecessarily. Hence, we should avoid admitting the existence of negative entities unless we have to. To see why, consider an empty room with just a spoon in it. If negative entities are admitted, to properly describe the room, we have to say that while it has one positive entity in it, the spoon, we also have to note that it is empty of chairs, tables, hippopotamuses, and in fact an infinite number of non-present entities. Nonetheless, he accepts that if the nothing is shown to be both irreducible to positive terms and indispensable to our best possible theories, we then have to admit of its existence. He notes that the best possible theory is not merely the best available theory, since our current state of knowledge may be far from complete. What then is a best theory? It not only should be able to explain the phenomena in its domain in an internally consistent way, but also cohere with our wider theories. Mumford makes a thorough study of what entities exemplify the nothing in common use in language and also the traditional ontological categories. They include negative properties, non-entities or negative particulars, including limits and boundaries, privations, shadows, wholes, omissions, negative mathematical and logical entities, and negative epistemic states. He also discusses causation by absence and possibilities. The nature of possibility is such that if all mutually exclusive possibilities for an event are exhaustively listed, only one among them becomes actual. What then is the reality of the possibilities that did not become actual? Say we toss a coin and it comes up heads. David Lewis's theory of modal realism suggests that there are possible worlds where the coin toss comes up tails. For Lewis, possible worlds are not just thought devices, but actually exist. Hence, the possibilities that are not actualized in our world are actualized in some other world. In that way, all possibilities are actual. Mumford notes that in addition to being ontologically extravagant, instead of explaining how something possible is in fact actual, what modal realism does is broaden the scope of actuality such that everything then becomes actual. Another theory is based on dispositions or powers. Aristotle refers to these as potency that have the potential to become act. Say a bird has the potency or potentiality to fly on its own power. It is currently at rest, so its potentiality to fly remains latent, but nonetheless real. Contrast that with a human being who does not have such a potentiality. Hence, the possibility of flying on our own power for us is not real, and hence has no possibility of being actual either. Disposition theory, while outlining what is possible, remains non-actual until it is actualized. Not bad, but Mumford thinks he can do better. He proposes a fictionalist approach, where mere possibilities which do not become actual can subsist but only as fictions. Fictions are false, but yet there seems to be something real about them. While we are able to refer to non-entities, they have no referent in existence. For instance, we know of fictitious characters such as Sherlock Holmes, his address and some events surrounding him, even the name of his friend, Watson, but there is no Sherlock in existence. He, Watson, other fictitious or mythical objects like unicorns, the number 0, and the empty set all have the same referent since there is only one nothing. But they are clearly not the same. Hence, we need a theory of empty reference. Mumford's theory of empty reference is fictionalism. He writes, We make fictional pretended references to things that we know do not exist, or we just fail to refer in cases where we are mistaken in believing that things exist when they don't. In either case, however, our words can be about things, since one can think about things that do not exist even if one cannot refer to them. Hence, we do not need to reify nothingness in order to deal with possibilities. The nothing is not indispensable for this class of non-entities. Other non-entities include wholes, shadows, limits, and boundaries. Such a whole is real, just like the edge of a piece of paper is real, marking where the paper ceases to be, but they both involve a discontinuity. As for shadows, they are an absence of light caused by the partial blocking of a light source. When we speak of a whole or totality, we must mean that beyond it there is no more of it. For instance, a piece of paper, the entire building, or the whole world. It seems that to describe a totality, wholes, and other omissions, the concept of what is not is needed. However, a hole in a piece of paper needs the piece of paper as a host, just like how the nothingness beyond the whole building or world requires the building and world as host. The host is an actual positive entity that can account for the non-existent entity. Hence, such non-entities are reducible to positive terms. Instead of asserting that the host is absent at its boundary, we deny that it is present there, better reflecting the metaphysical reality that there is only what is, adds Mumford. The hole in the paper is then a denial that there is paper there in that space, just like the absence of world beyond the world can be on Mumford's lights more accurately described as a denial that there is more of the same world beyond the world. Mumford makes an important point that denial should be considered as separate act from assertion. He writes, "Denial requires no ontological commitment to a truth maker or false maker. By denying the presence of an entity, it is not that we are making an ontological commitment to the existence of a negative entity. Instead, we are denying the presence of a positive entity, which, if present, would have been the truth maker. For instance, when I note that my keys are missing from its bowl, I am not asserting the existence of not keys in that bowl, but is instead denying that there are keys there. More generally, there is a difference between believing not P and not believing P. Negation and denial differ since negation is an assertion which then implies an ontological commitment to the actuality of the negated object. A prime characteristic of what makes a thing actual is that it causes effects in other things. If there is no effect, then there is no sense to speak of its cause, which seems to imply that the causes of material effects must be existent. Causation by absence putatively takes place when an absence of something seems to be the cause of an effect, which makes the absence an important phenomenon demonstrating the actuality of the nothing. For instance, missing the bus caused you to be late for work. Mumford explains that while absences can explain occurrences, they are powerless to actually cause anything, since the nothing being nothing can possess no actual power. There is no truth maker. However, they seem to be a cause because of a counterfactual. If you did not miss the bus, you would have been on time to work, but since you did miss the bus, you are late. Yet the missing bus did not cause you to be late. Rather, if the counterfactual had happened, if you had caught the bus, you would have been on time. There is no causation by absence, but there is explanation by absence, Mumford reiterates. The absent object or event is dispensable to a proper causal explanation, reducible to its positive inversion. He also considers the nature of negative properties such as non-red, not hot or cold as a lack of heat, not tall or short as opposed to tall, and not many but few. Usually when several objects are considered to have the same properties, they are similar. For instance, objects with both motors and wheels are vehicles. However, negative properties seem to violate this principle that a property is a one that runs through many. For instance, two objects lacking wheels are rocks and scissors. Despite sharing this common, albeit negative property, they seemingly do not form a class. Hence, if a property is defined as a one that runs through many, then negative properties do not seem to be properties at all. Mumford, however, points out that this argument is invalid since it is question-begging, already assuming that negative properties do not exist. The way rocks and scissors are similar is that they both have no wheels, the one running through many being the lack of wheels. However, Mumford offers an explanation that he hopes dispenses with the actuality of negative properties. How we recognize a negative property is when we perceive what a thing is not. For instance, a lack of wheels in our rock and scissors, or a man lacking hair on his head, if say it was a police lineup after we had been attacked by a bald man. We are looking for a characteristic that is useful to us, and this characteristic can be in the form of a presence or an absence. If we are looking for our keys and do not find them at their usual place, our expectations are disappointed. Mumford thinks that such perceptions of absences can be adequately explained by an evolutionarily useful non-rational mental mechanism. It is non-rational in the sense that it is not a result of an inferential mental calculation, since our phenomenal perceptual experience of such absences tends to be immediate, not requiring a deliberate cognition. It is evolutionarily useful because to perceive a lack of something can be life-preserving. For instance, if we perceive a lack of ground that prevents us from walking over a cliff. We perceive an absence intuitively not because absences have actuality, but because of an evolutionary benefit. Negative properties are hence in that way useful, but are dispensable, since it can be explained by appealing to an evolutionary response rather than an ontology. With the devices of denial, the evolutionarily conditioned perception of absence, and a fictionalist theory of empty reference, Mumford thinks we can now explain how something is not, without ontologically committing to its existence. His solution is epistemological and linguistic. It is understandably not ontological, since he in fact denies the actuality of the non-existent. He has shown that negative entities are reducible to positive ones, and that they are also not indispensable to our best possible theories. Negations can be reduced to denials. Absences have no causal power but only explanatory power in the same way that denials work. For instance, a lack of water caused my plant to die, but it is not absence that is in fact causal. It is the presence of water that causes a plant to live. Likewise, omissions require positive hosts, where they can be accounted for by denying the presence of the positive host. On totality, we need not assert that there are no more first-order facts when we want to total some set of facts. We can deny that there are more facts, which needs nothing in the world to make it true. Because of this inversion, there are then different types of nothings. The absence of hair in a bald person is different from the absence of water for the plants. They deny different things and hence require differing explanations as he had given them. He concludes that negativity is not a feature of the world itself, but a feature of the way we think and talk about the world. It has good sense on its side. What is not has no existence. It is not part of what is. But it is clear that we can and do talk about what there is not. What Mumford had done in his book was to examine various types of nothings. But Heidegger may accuse him, as he did philosophers' sons, the pre-Socratics such as Parmenides, for tackling nothings and not the nothing. What Heidegger does say is that the field of metaphysics was concerning itself not with its raison d'etre, which is to tackle the nature of being and not beings. Heidegger even tried to go from the study of the ontology of das Nichts, the nothing, to then use it to examine all metaphysics. Beings and being qua being are not the same thing. Similarly, I want to argue that nothings and the nothing qua nothingness are not the same. Mumford's analysis works well if what is required is a contrast between beings and nothings. The expressions of negative entities in terms of positive entities work if there are positive entities acting as hosts, contrasts, and conceptual foils, but the nothing qua nothingness cannot be resolved via a contrast with beings or even being qua being. Mumford's analysis already require a world of beings by which the contrast with nothings and negation is needed to describe non-entities such as boundaries, wholes, shadows, negative properties, and absences of beings. It makes an unspoken cosmological assumption that at first there was already something from which things can then develop from. This is not an unreasonable assumption. It is a creatio ex materia, and in fact is what the Big Bang theory posits. All matter and energy was compressed into a hyper-dense, hyper-tiny point from which cosmic inflation began from. The theory is unable to explain how the matter and energy got there. Like the non-cyclical versions of the Big Bang theory, cyclical theories where each Big Bang ends with a big crunch, which then rebounds with a new Big Bang, also sidesteps this problem. Matter and energy were basically already all existent as a brute fact. In such a cosmology, Mumford's analysis is suitable since the nothing is nothing. That is, it does not exist. There never was a state of absolute nothingness. This assumption may be correct. We currently do not know and may never be able to find out definitively either, since our best science, at least for the moment, general relativity and quantum theory, is unable to peek past the instant of the Big Bang. We do have theories, but with no real way of proving them, hence making them merely speculation. Not that there is anything wrong with speculation per se. I have discussed this in my book-length Metaphysical Investigations. In that essay, I discussed Creatio ex materia, but was more intrigued by Creatio ex nihilo, or how something can come from nothing, or more precisely, the nothing. Creatio ex nihilo, like Creatio ex materia, is a hypothesis. The nihilo in such a creatio is, however, a true nothingness, as close to a complete void as it actually can be. It is not a negative entity that subsists due to a positive host entity, because at first, in such an empty universe, there was actually only nothing. However, because we live currently in a universe of at least some things, we know that if indeed the starting point was the nothing, somehow from it must emerge something. This is known in the literature as the entropic principle, where theories on the development of the universe must be consistent with the universe as it currently is, one capable of developing observers such as us. Note that we are talking about the universe here. The universe is the totality of all worlds, the entirety of all there is, and if Sartre's second definition of totality of the ancient Greeks is correct, also of the nothing surrounding all worlds. Since the universe is all there is, then this universe was at first empty. There is no outside where something can arrive from. The universe is the totality of which there is no outside. Hence, if we want to persist on such a path of inquiry, we cannot depend on a deus ex machina to provide the answer. If a deus is in this primordial universe, then it is not empty. This deus cannot also be outside the universe, since the universe is already the totality of all things. Even if he resides on a transcendental level, this transcendental level is part of the universe as per definition. Our theory will have to depend on no outside help, since there is no outside, and no material, since there is none. How then can something come from the nothing? This is one of the great questions of philosophy. The Tao Te Ching was written around 500 BCE, and at that time, Lao Tzu already thought of the emptiness of the Tao as origin of all, as the deepest of mysteries. Today, 2,500 years later, it remains a mystery, despite attempts by the best thinkers to explain it. I want to suggest that about 100 years ago, we finally had a scientific breakthrough that can throw some light on the matter, and that is quantum theory. In the introduction to this essay, I have talked about how the void, as described through quantum theory, is not a space devoid of absolutely anything. It is instead awash in quantum fields. Is this move cheating or sleight of hand, where the nothing is in fact not really empty at all? Perhaps. But we should consider whether our expectations of the void as a space containing nothing are misplaced. In the void, there may not be any matter and energy, but should, for instance, the laws of logic apply? How about the laws of mathematics or physics? How about ideas, numbers, or information? Can they exist in the void? Because these laws and items are abstract, they do not depend on material entities to stand. Some of them, the laws of logic and mathematics for instance, are a priori, meaning they do not rely on empirical verification to ascertain their truth. They are simply true. Hence, there does not seem to be any principled reason why these laws and abstract items cannot exist in the void, though they may not. The point is that the void does not have to be truly devoid of everything. I'm using the word thing to encompass not just material things, but also immaterial things. I want to compare this with how early experiments on vacuums surprised the scientists then. The fact that light can travel through a vacuum is not something taken for granted by them. The prevailing idea was that a physical medium is required to transmit energy, which was why the all-pervasive ether was proposed. Light was considered to be composed of particles, and yet these particles managed to traverse a space evacuated of any medium, whilst sound is unable to. Will light be able to traverse our hypothetical void? For that matter, is the vacuum really a portable void? Arguably, it is not. Electromagnetic waves can pass through and is within the vacuum, such waves being energy. The void, by contrast, is a primordial state where there is presumably not only no matter but also no energy within it. To even talk of within and outside the void is also mistaken. A vacuum is contained by its walls, such as in a vacuum tube or a thermos flask. The void has no walls. Because our universe contains nothing, the void will extend infinitely since there is nothing for it to be limited or contained by. It will be dark and cold within it since there is no energy and hence no light, and cold since temperature is a proxy of the vibration of atoms and molecules of which there are none. Hence, its condition will be one of complete darkness and a temperature of absolute zero, that is, 0 kelvins. How about space-time? Is there space, time, or space-time in the void? General relativity tells us that space-time only unfolds with the cosmic inflation of the Big Bang. Because all matter and energy was contained in a hyper-dense and hyper-tiny point, the force of gravity was so intense that space-time was so tightly curved that it formed only an infinitesimal point. Space-time hence seems to only emerge with the emergence of matter and energy. Since the void has no matter and energy ex hypothesis, there should hence be no space-time whatsoever in it. With no matter, no energy, and no space-time, how can the void kickstart the beginning? Quantum theory tells us that virtual particles can emerge in a vacuum due to the fluctuations and interactions of the various quantum fields present in the space of a vacuum. In a volume with matter reduced to a temperature of absolute zero, the particles there will still have some motion, since to the extent that their position is certain, their momentum will be uncertain, given Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. The question we have to answer is whether quantum theory is operative in the void. More specifically, does Heisenberg's uncertainty principle? Recall that the principle is a consequence of the wave-particle duality of matter. Position and momentum, time and energy, are the two pairs that have been specifically explicated for the principle to apply to. The shorter the time frame, the more uncertainty the level of energy within the space. However, if there is no space whatsoever anywhere in the universe, since space-time has not yet unfolded, or rather is non-existent, does the uncertainty principle apply? Asking about the void is often compared to asking what is north of the North Pole. The latter question is inadmissible because Earth is a sphere and so there is nothing of Earth further north of its North Pole. However, the geometry of the void is not known and hence is a fortiori not known to be spherical. My purpose in raising all these is to say that the various situations are not comparable to that of the void. The absolute nothingness or void of the primordial universe prior to the Creatio events does not have any current instances in the universe and perhaps not even any close analogues. Vacuums have walls, black holes have mass, and both have energy within them. Empty spaces in outer space likewise have energy coursing through them. Perhaps a large vacuum can be built with walls far apart, such that the space in its middle approximates a wall-less vacuum. It can be shrouded in complete darkness with electromagnetic shields, like a Faraday's cage to prevent electromagnetic waves from entering, and cooled to a temperature of absolute zero. But even in such a vacuum, we cannot remove the space-time within it. Hence, the void is unprecedented. We are unable to replicate it, and we will also never experience it in its primal state. Yet, if we are to answer how we can go from the state of the void to our current universe of things, our theory will need to explain how the nothing can manifest something. The nothing will itself have to already possess some characteristics to make this transition possible. For the void to be able to manifest virtual particles, which can later consolidate to form actual particles, quantum theory needs to be operative. For quantum theory to be operative, we need quantum fields to be present. For quantum fields to be present, we need space-time. And yet, according to the Big Bang theory and general relativity, space-time was so tightly curved as to be only a point at the instant of the Big Bang. Space-time only unfolded as a result of the cosmic inflation which was caused by the Big Bang. But without space-time, there are no quantum fields, since quantum fields is a property of space. For quantum fields to be in the void, we need the void to have space. But since the concept of absolute space has been debunked, leaving us only with relative space, which itself is a result of mass energy in general relativity, we have a paradox. One way to resolve this paradox is to reconcile general relativity with quantum theory to get a theory of quantum gravity. Brane theory, string theory, and M theory are some of the leading contenders. They posit extra dimensions of space, and I want to make use of this suggestion to propose an idea as follows. It is only an idea since it will require further development to become a theory proper. Its fundamental premise is that the primordial universe has more dimensions than the three spatial and one-time dimensions we are used to. Let us call the latter four dimensions of space-time regular dimensions, and the additional dimensions higher dimensions. A space with all the dimensions is known as the bulk or hyperspace in Brane theory. Prior to there being any matter and energy in the universe, the bulk was there in the form of the void. As earlier noted, the void must still obey certain principles such as the laws of logic and physics, such as the principle of conservation of mass energy. There is no matter and energy in the void, and hence it remains in the equilibrium of dark absolute zero. The void is a hyperspace with all the dimensions, both higher and regular. Since it is a space, it is awash with quantum fields. Why? Because quantum fields are intrinsic properties of space. If there is space, there are quantum fields. It is what space is. What are fields? A field is a continuous manifold in space, where each point in this manifold has a value of what it is a field of. If it is a magnetic field, then each point of this magnetic field has a value of magnetism. If it is an electric field, then each point of this electric field has a value of electricity. I am not suggesting, however, that the void has magnetic or electric fields. They are only chosen to illustrate what fields are because they are familiar phenomena. Instead, the space of the void has only quantum fields. A field in equilibrium in the void may have at every single point a value of zero, which means that whatever quantity of that type of field is conserved and equal to zero. However, conservation and equilibrium still holds so long as the vector value of all points in the field sums to zero. Hence, one point can have a value of say 1 pointing in one direction, and another point in the hyperspace a value of say -1 pointing in the opposite direction, and there is still equilibrium and conservation of that field's quantity, which sums to zero. Hence, the field at a given point can fluctuate away from zero so long as it has a counterpart at another point with the opposite value and direction. The fluctuations and interactions of the various fields can give rise to pairs of virtual particles for brief periods, which means that there is a particle and an antiparticle of the same type generated. The particle and antiparticle are then attracted to each other due to their opposing charge and often mutually annihilate, returning the space to the state of the void. Energy and mass remains conserved throughout. In my metaphysical investigations essay, I have proposed two potential mechanisms by which virtual particles can become actual particles through separation while still obeying mass energy conservation. They are 1. A wall of virtual particles springing up between the components of an earlier pair, separating them permanently. 2. A reaction between components of different pairs leads to new compound particles that are unreactive with the original components. From there, the primordial universe is on its way to become a universe of things. The task of this essay is complete, which is to propose a plausible way of how the nothing can generate something, but perhaps I should also explain how the sparse universe develops to the stage of the Big Bang. The early actual particles continue forming out of virtual particles via the mechanisms, and these fundamental particles consolidate to progressively become protons, neutrons, atoms, molecules, stars, planets, galaxies, and so on, becoming more and more massive until they collapse on themselves, which will be our first big crunch, where all the mass and energy gets compressed into a hyper-dense, hyper-tiny space of a singularity, which then rebounds to give the Big Bang. Since my aim in this essay is about the nothing, I will not attempt to grapple with the cause of the Big Bang. As noted, the Big Bang theory presupposes materia, and so does not deal with Creatio ex Nihilo. However, for the sake of completeness, we can note that there are theories on how and why the singularity led to the Big Bang, from the collision of different brains to an instability of the highly dense singularity and the mutual repulsion of the masses within it, a repulsive gravity as opposed to the usual attractive force of gravity between masses. Others profess an agnosticism, while the Big Bang theory itself only hypothesizes what happens after the bang and not what caused it. Recall that the pre-Big Crunch universe is in hyperspace, a space with both higher and regular dimensions. Yet, why is it that the post-Big Bang universe has only seemingly the 4 regular ones? We know from general relativity that at the singularity, all the mass and energy is concentrated into a point. Because mass energy deforms the geometry of space-time, this hyper-dense singularity causes space-time to curve so tightly that it is effectively reduced to that point also. Note that a point has a geometry of 0 dimensions. Then when the Big Bang happens and the cosmos inflates, only 4 regular dimensions unfold. What happened to the higher dimensions? There are a few possibilities. 1. They are still there. The singularity sits in a space of only the higher dimensions. The higher dimensions are not susceptible to the gravitational attraction of mass energy and remain as they are. The 4 regular dimensions get folded into the singularity and then expand out upon the Big Bang, returning all dimensions to hyperspace. However, we are unable to detect the higher dimensions despite their large, potentially infinite sizes because we are four-dimensional beings, the limitations of our sensory apparatus, or both. 2. All dimensions are folded into the singularity, and in the subsequent Big Bang expansion, only the four regular dimensions get unfolded. The higher dimensions remain tightly curved in this new geometry of the universe. One way to imagine how the number of dimensions can be reduced is to imagine compressing a block of aluminum. The block is three-dimensional. When intensely compressed, say as tight as a singularity, it is reduced to a point which, if dense enough, is zero-dimensional. Then, depending on how we unfold the now hyperdense point, we can 1. Unfold it in a line which will be one-dimensional, really three, but with a narrow height and thickness. 2. Unfold it into a sheet like aluminum foil, which is two-dimensional, really three, but with a narrow height. Or 3. Unfold it into a block, which is three-dimensional. The point being that it is possible to reduce the number of dimensions of an object. There is another possible solution that follows the general scheme of my idea. This solution assumes that there are only the four regular dimensions, 3 of space and 1 of time. The void has these and only these dimensions. Quantum fields are awash in them because it is the nature of space that it contains and is pervaded by quantum fields. Virtual particles hence can form, leading to actual particles, which then leads to protons, neutrons, atoms, molecules, stars, planets, galaxies, and so on, becoming more and more massive until they collapse on themselves. This will be our first big crunch, where all the masses and energy get compressed into a hyper-dense, hyper-tiny space of a singularity, which then rebounds to give the Big Bang. During the Big Crunch, the regular dimensions, which are space-time, become increasingly curved due to increasing gravity as all matter energy become increasingly compressed, finally into a singularity. Upon the Big Bang and its cosmic inflation, the regular dimensions gets unfolded. This second solution with only regular dimensions is less general than the first solution with both higher and regular dimensions. Since the best theory currently for quantum gravity require higher dimensions, I devised the more general solution. Both solutions are driven by a need to explain how space is primordially present in the void, since we need space in order to have quantum fields. The solution that is less general is a reduction of the general solution with numbers of higher dimensions equal to 0 or number of dimensions equal to 4, and hence can be considered special compared to the general solution, using the same parlance as special and general relativity. In conclusion, the cosmology proposed in the latter half of this essay presumes a creatio ex nihilo. Hence, the universe was at first a void. The void is unprecedented, only weakly comparable to vacuums or states of empty space. It leads to a first universe of things, which ends in a big crunch, resulting in a singularity which then rebounds into a Big Bang. My proposed solutions use quantum theory. However, quantum fields are only present if space already exists. Because general relativity teaches that the Big Bang singularity is so dense that space-time becomes so tightly curved to form only a point which unfolds upon cosmic inflation, it would seem that space-time did not precede the Big Bang. I propose a way out by leveraging higher dimensions, which are an integral part of brain, string, and M theory, the leading theories of everything. It is a general solution, but if it is later shown that higher dimensions do not exist, the general solution simply reduces to the special solution, which uses only the regular dimensions. While speculative, if right, it will explain how from the nothing can come something. The nothing can really then be the source of everything. We can finally understand how, as expressed by the Tao, the nothing is a space which is empty of stuff but full of possibilities. Thank you for listening to the Philosophical Bachelor.